very much for the invitation, and also that we have not just Lithuania, but also, as I understand, also from Latvia, Estonia, and even from Poland, somehow connected people in the room and elsewhere. So that's a really good opportunity to try to discuss a little bit the higher, if you like, framework of climate policy and how this fits in with agriculture. And I'm going to take you through just a few concepts, a few issues related to the challenges, political context, the proposal for LULUCF. Many of you want to know that, but it stands for land use change and forestry. It's the missing component of agriculture in climate policy. And at the end, I will go through, I've left a lot of material in the presentation that may be of use later, but to show different studies that we've been funding to try to understand what action can be done in agriculture and on land use to help mitigate climate change. Now, in fact, I'm going to speak mostly about mitigation of climate change. So mitigation is the reduction of greenhouse gases, or the emissions of greenhouse gases. I'm not going to touch upon adaptation, but adaptation is clearly a very, very important component for any agriculture manager. If you're a farmer or a forester, and you definitely have to be able to be confronted by what climate change will bring. So even though it's not visible in the framework I'm describing now, it has to be part of the framework in the discussions in the future on how to go forward. Now this is a little diagram that would be perhaps suited for a book with children. In fact, it comes from the IPCC scientific report. I think it's from not AR5, it's from AR4, so 5 or 6 years ago now. But we found it quite useful to try to then show, well, from the trees, the biomass, the soils, the harvest of crops, cattle, manure, where do the different gases come from and where do they go and where is carbon in this cycle. And actually, it's quite a complicated set of fluxes. It's not like just taking your car and driving it where the carbon dioxide is coming out of the exhaust, or where there is a factory with a chimney. No, a farm and forests are very complicated biophysical systems, and therefore we have to try to understand the fluxes of these gases. And then, of course, the difficult point is how do we bring that into a policy context? How do we bring it into a framework to set legislation to be able to manage that? Now, up till now, only the parts related to methane and nitrous oxide are being dealt with under EU policy. They are part of the current effort sharing decision, put it in the top right corner there, and they are already part of the targets that each member state is has to achieve by 2020. The big question is, how do we take into account the other components, which are mostly CO2 related, and also are not just emissions, but also capturing of carbon through photosynthesis, and how do we bring that into the framework? Well, we do have a framework, a decision called the LULUCF decision, which is in operation today, which helps member states to develop their systems for that monitoring. But the key point is that post-2020, in line with the Paris Agreement, we need to be able to do those measurements as well. And that's the part that is this famous LULUCF, land use change and forestry. Now, in terms of the targets, what was agreed a couple of years ago between the EU member states in the European Council, so the heads of states, in fact, was to increase what's called the ambition, the level, if you like, of reductions that would take place overall to at least 40% greenhouse gas reduction compared to 1990 by 2030. But this is a little bit of a summary, if you like, of how that reduction actually works. First part is there is what is called the ETS. This is the emission trader scheme. It's the manufacturing, the energy plants, the big plants that can actually be identified, the chimney stack, that where you can measure the carbon dioxide being released. There are actually about 11,000 of such entities across the EU, and they have a reduction that will be for 2030 of minus 43%. That's making up about a little bit less than half of the emissions in the EU. Then you have the non-ETS, so everything that is not the ETS. So this is road transport, housing, waste, includes agriculture non-CO2, so the two gases that I just mentioned, methane and nitrous oxide. And at the moment, the target is for 2020 to go to minus 10 compared to compared to 2005. And in the future, the 2030 target is to go to minus 30%. But what is important in the framework now is that land use change in forestry becomes part of the non-ETS component. So it becomes part of the system to determine our whole greenhouse gas reductions. Now looking backwards, it's quite important to note that, okay, EU agriculture is approximately 10% of all of the EU's greenhouse gas emissions. So not the biggest, but certainly not insignificant. And the agricultural emissions have reduced by 24% since 1990. But a lot of that, of course, is due to the kind of structural changes that was mentioned just now. That there are, in particular, the accession countries since 2004 had seen in the 1990s, Lithuania is one, where there was a very big structural change in agriculture. Nevertheless, I should point out that countries like Denmark have actually also reduced their agricultural emissions by 24%. So it is not only through structural change that this happens. It's also through technology, it's through good planning, it's through modern practices. So whereas in the past it's been a lot related to structural change, the question ahead of us is how to make sure that in the future it's about management and not due to structural change. Agriculture and forest land use are basically a net carbon sink. When you combine together the forest areas, often the ones that are managed by farmers, with the farmland, that's absorbing more carbon than being released. So trying to look at farming as a unit rather than just an emitter of greenhouse gas is quite important. An integrated view of it, I think, is becoming more and more recognized as essential. And I think as farmers, you can't view it in any other way. You don't view, that is emitting methane and this is absorbing carbon. No, we have to look at what is the system and how can the management bring this together. So we'll have to look at the benefits of what an integrated approach to farming thinking can bring us. Now this is the roadmap that is dating from 2009, 2010, I think, which the Commission put forward for climate policy, just a schematic. We are thinking about revising this in light of the Paris Agreement, in light of the ambitions that are expressed by not just the EU, but all countries who signed the Paris Agreement. And you can see that what was envisaged is that by 2050 to reduce emissions from 100% to 20%, so 80% reduction in emissions. And you can see that the power sector virtually disappears in emissions, residential becomes very small, industry decreases a lot, transport by about a half, but agriculture stays relatively large component. And that's because it is recognized that agriculture needs to provide food, it needs to provide raw materials for us to have security, food security, but also global security in terms of people need to be able to sustain their lives. And we think that scientifically it's going to be very difficult on the non-CO2 side to reduce that to zero. What this also means is that by 2050, agriculture will take up a much bigger proportion of all emissions. So the focus of emissions in climate moves more and more towards agriculture. In the EU, it will be about 1/3 we expect, as compared to today, which is 10–15%. So, more or less tripling its current share. Paris Agreement has already been mentioned, and indeed today is the day it enters in force. Thanks very much to the agreement by member states to ratify it 1 month ago. That is a very, very big step, and I'll come to some slides later what other countries are doing. I think it is a phenomenal step forward in our lifetimes that we have this level of agreement internationally. But the global commitment now and the recognition that this is a problem that we all need to address together is, I think, an enormous boost to making things happen on climate. So the agreement, or the aspiration that's put into the Paris Agreement, is to hold the increase in global average temperature to well below 2 degrees. It's a very long sentence. It's above pre-industrial levels. This means compared to about 1850. Bear in mind we're already at 1 degree above. I think it's been confirmed in the last month or so that 2016 will also be the hottest year on record. So this is looking quite a tough task ahead of us. And actually, really, if we can keep it to 1.5 degrees or somewhere close to 1.5, that's safer for all our systems, including production of food. One of the other points in the agreement is that land use can contribute to this global mitigation effort, and it has to be included in the overall calculation. What we do with land use is very important. So the land use component globally accounts for actually about 1/4 of global emissions. It's also very important that there is direct acknowledgement of food security in the Paris Agreement. Again, the two things go hand in hand. Without having protected our climate, we won't have food security, but at the same time, there's no point in not being able to